My son, Ethan, wants to marry the daughter of a criminal. I give you my blessing. My daughter, Clara, wants to elope with a homeless man. I support you. My husband, Senator Charles Hamilton, wants to take that girl from the Platinum Club as his second wife. I welcome it with a smile. I don't care about any of it. I'll see how long you all can continue to swagger around. In my previous life, in order to preserve the family's dignity, I, Eleanor Stone, exhausted myself dealing with all these troubles. Unexpectedly, this calamity ultimately fell upon me. They tied me up in the vault, broke my arms, legs, and bones. Finally, they stabbed a needle straight into my chest, and I died. That Ethan even made a show of saying he must be made to experience the pain of having a drill driven into his heart just like him. I've been reborn. I returned to the night my husband insisted on marrying that girl from the Platinum Club. The moment I opened my eyes, I was kneeling beside my husband. Charles said, "Don't bother with her, just let her kneel. Whatever she says is useless. Because I've already decided to bring her in. She is merely someone brought in by the Stone family as a second wife. How can she be so insolent?" Senator Charles Hamilton, my husband, was so angry his eyes were red, and he stood up, preparing to fling his sleeves and leave. I quickly stood up. In the previous life, because he stubbornly insisted on marrying that girl from the Platinum Club as an equal wife, I desperately advised against it for a long time but failed. Out of necessity, I cited the family rules, knelt before him, and even threatened my own life before he abandoned the idea. I thought he had genuinely changed his mind, so I used gentle words to persuade him. Little did I know, he rented a house outside and kept the girl there. After she gave birth to a son, she plotted to enter the house and replace my position as the lady of the estate. That was what sowed the seed for the murderous calamity that befell me. At this very moment, I immediately smiled and stood up. This concubine performs this grand gesture to congratulate my husband and Lady Melissa on their joyous occasion. In the estate, there are only Ethan and Clara, and the two children are growing up. My husband's bedside has always been a little lonely. Lady Melissa is young and talented, with a beautiful appearance. My husband is also in the prime of his life. Surely, you will be able to add many more descendants to the manor. Upon hearing this, my husband's expression softened. He took my hand, his face full of satisfaction. "Eleanor, I know your personality is not that of an old-fashioned, conservative woman. Melissa is young and inexperienced. I ask that you look after her more in the future. The residence will be the best one. The Willow Villa. You can oversee the renovations. Money is not an issue." "That would be wonderful. I still have things to do. The day I have chosen is the second day of the 6th lunar month. You should go prepare everything." I smiled, put his outer coat on him, and saw him off. Watching his receding figure, the smile on my face deepened. I am so certain because I know, on the first day of the next month, my Ethan Hamilton will come to me to talk about bringing Victoria, the author he loves, into the house. There will be many good shows to watch. Ethan Hamilton and Clara Hamilton are siblings, and they are not my biological children. It was only because my cousin, the original first wife, passed away that I was brought in by the clan to be the second wife. They said it was to look after the two children, but in reality, it was because they didn't want to sever the marital connection with the Hamilton estate. That year, I felt a sense of humiliation, and from then on, I resolutely gave up the idea of having children, devoting myself wholeheartedly to raising them. Ethan Hamilton and Clara Hamilton are twins. As everyone knows, my cousin, the original wife, had spoiled and educated them even more from childhood. When I arrived, the siblings were already 10 years old and extremely unruly. Even though for the next 6 years, I poured all my efforts into both verbal instruction and hiring expensive, renowned tutors to teach them diligently, I couldn't sway them in the slightest. Time flies quickly. I had people ostentatiously renovate the Willow Villa, and I even opened the treasury, deliberately adding a lot of money to it, while the other parts of the manor looked gray and dilapidated. The first day of the second lunar month quickly arrived. Without surprise, as dusk fell, Ethan Hamilton stepped under the moonlight to my courtyard to pay his respects. He wore a gold crown inlaid with jade and a brocade gown of snow blue. He truly was a handsome and elegant young master. He even rarely called me mother. I knew he had come to ask for my permission to bring Victoria into the house. Victoria was his childhood sweetheart. She was slender and delicate like a weeping willow in the wind. She was proficient in painting, embroidery, tea ceremony, and music. It was just a pity that her refined air was accumulated by her father through embezzling $50 million USD. Her father had never thought highly of Ethan Hamilton. Determined to climb the high branch of the president, unexpectedly, the wind changed direction, and she became a publicly supervised ward due to her father's crimes. Ethan Hamilton raced day and night, regardless of the long distance, going everywhere to redeem her and bring her back. In the previous life, I was worried that it was inappropriate for a powerful family like ours to openly marry the daughter of a criminal, going against the wishes of the president. So, I advised him to quietly bring her in as a companion. Once things had settled down, it would be easier to make long-term plans. Unexpectedly, he flatly refused. When Victoria saw that he was no longer useful, she turned her back on him and became the mistress of a big boss. Ethan Hamilton hated me from then on, until he finally stabbed a steel needle into my heart. Before he could finish speaking, I put on a look of sorrow, even lightly dabbing the corner of my eye with a handkerchief. Victoria is a child I watched grow up. How could such a good child encounter these calamities? You must quickly bring her into the manor. The weather is cold, and she is a delicate girl. This will spare her from suffering. Ethan Hamilton's joy was evident on his face. He quickly sat down beside me. It is mother who understands my heart. I have already brought the person back to the villa. I see that the Willow Villa in the front courtyard has been recently renovated. Victoria has been frail and sensitive to the cold since childhood. Why don't we let her stay there? I was secretly delighted, but I didn't show any expression outwardly. I only frowned, my voice sounding hesitant. The Willow Villa belongs to your father. I pretended to pause for a moment. Sure enough, Ethan Hamilton fell into the trap. Father loves me the most. He is away on official business for a few days. When he returns, he will naturally be happy to see Victoria. Mother, I must go. I'll pack Victoria's belongings and have her move in tonight. He looked joyful, quickly stood up, and hurried off to prepare. It was true that Victoria moved into the Willow Villa that very night. It certainly lived up to the name of the place. The spring scenery unfolded all night long. The servants all hastily stayed away from that courtyard. The next morning, my husband brought Melissa into the manor. Both were wearing deep red ceremonial robes, looking every bit like a newly wedded couple. A few days before the ceremony, he had carefully inspected the renovations of the Willow Villa, was very satisfied, and praised me highly. I watched from afar as they walked straight into the Willow Villa. One could imagine the glorious scene. Upon entering the door, they would see a mess, with two naked people sleeping soundly. In just a moment, the Willow Villa was in an uproar. When I slowly arrived, Ethan Hamilton was kneeling naked on the ground. There were several obvious red marks on his face, and his back was covered in whip marks. Victoria was unharmed, but her hair was messy, and she was only wearing a thin robe. Kneeling tremblingly beside him, Senator Charles Hamilton sat in his chair, shaking with rage. The side wife Melissa, next to him, had a face full of anger. One could easily guess, she had finally managed to entice the man who had spent millions of dollars to redeem her. Originally thinking she could now live the wealthy and prosperous life of an official lady. Yet, the moment she stepped through the manor gates, she was met with such a disgraceful scene. Senator Charles Hamilton erupted in fury, personally taking out a whip and beating Ethan Hamilton thoroughly. He then drove Victoria out of the Willow Villa, because he was angry that they had defiled the house where he was starting a new life. A seed of resentment was sown in his heart from then on. Melissa often spoke ill of Charles to him in bed, The father-son relationship between them was already strained, and it had only been maintained through my mediation over the years. But now, Charles, influenced by the whispers in his ear, found his son increasingly displeasing. He was determined to have another son with Melissa, to cultivate him from the start, to inherit his family business. Melissa's belly was indeed ambitious. She was pregnant in less than half a month. Her morale also became more spirited. She frequently called Victoria, the only daughter-in-law, out to kneel in the courtyard for a lecture. One day, I happened to pass by and truly witnessed a lively scene. Victoria bit her lip. Kneeling in the courtyard, Melissa sat on a grand tutor's chair, casually inspecting her freshly dyed henna nails. "What's wrong, sister?" "This Victoria. The child has suffered a lot outside. Her body is weak. I'm afraid she won't be able to bear it," I asked casually, but did not try to intervene, only sitting down on a chair nearby. "You're late, sister. You didn't see the commotion. This girl has a sharp tongue. Today, I kindly asked her to come and eat some fruit, but she broke my plate. She must look down on my new life status and think I embarrass her." Victoria's tears fell in streams. "Victoria didn't mean that. I haven't even done anything. And you're crying already? You chose to kneel just now. Now you're acting as if I'm bullying you." That day, who was it, I wonder, who was naked and hugging a man in my room? Shameless in broad daylight, not properly married, yet acting without restraint. Being penalized as a public custody ward makes her no different from my background. Yet, she looks down on me. Who knows how many people have tasted her red lips and slept on her powdered wall. I only pity our Ethan, who still treats you like an invaluable treasure. Melissa, who came from the Platinum Club, had a sharp tongue. She was so vicious that even a matchmaker would hang herself. Now, raising her voice like this in broad daylight completely humiliated Victoria. Every day, she had to endure these petty torments, which naturally bred deep resentment towards Melissa. However, Victoria, a person who could survive and crawl out of the brink of death in public custody, was certainly no harmless little white lotus from a political family. What she used, naturally, were tricks of extreme feigned grievance and pitifulness, fooling Ethan Hamilton into confronting Melissa several times for her. Both were quite adept at the subtle maneuvers of the back inner quarters, focusing all their energy on battling each other, no longer paying attention to me, this lady of the Hamilton estate. Sitting on the mountain to watch the tigers fight was naturally very entertaining. But I had more important things to do, because my own daughter, Clara Hamilton, was about to elope with that poor Liam Miller. If she hadn't been completely wrapped up with her lover, Clara Hamilton would have come to watch the commotion long ago. Last month, she had met this writer named Miller at an elegant tea ceremony gathering of aristocratic young ladies. Liam Miller's poetry was not particularly good, but he had a unique talent for climbing walls, which had touched Clara Hamilton's heart. But he had studied hard for many years and was still just a college student. No matter what, Charles Hamilton would never agree to this marriage. When the marriage proposal failed, Liam Miller bewitched Clara Hamilton's mind, tricking her into running away with him. In fact, when it came to tricks for making others suffer, neither Melissa nor Victoria could compare to her. Clara Hamilton had been arrogant since childhood. If she was displeased, she would scratch people with her hands. The meticulously maintained set of fingernails had scratched the faces of countless young ladies in the metropolis. The reason no one dared to touch a single hair on her head was simply because she was the daughter of the Hamilton estate, had already been put on the socialite selection list, and had the potential to become an imperial lady later on. In my previous life, she brazenly rushed into the treasury to take bank drafts, wanting to buy a house somewhere else with Liam Miller. I considered the fact that she held the status of one awaiting imperial selection, so I went to great lengths to stop her. Afterwards, I found Senator Hamilton outside the manor and reported the incident. Charles was furious and locked Clara Hamilton in confinement, separating the lovers. That scoundrel Liam Miller, knowing his plan was exposed, was afraid that the estate would come looking for trouble, so he fearfully rode his horse and fled the city. That very night, unexpectedly, the mountain road was treacherous, and being a rider, he was robbed by mountain bandits halfway, and both he and his horse were pushed off the cliff. When the news arrived, Clara Hamilton refused to eat or drink. I saw her weeping all day, looking incredibly pitiful. Day after day, I went to her bedside to care for her, comforted her with kind words, and secretly invited a female doctor to diagnose and treat her. Little did I know that on the day she recovered, she immediately went before Charles and tearfully accused me of being the one who had brought Liam Miller to her, ruining her reputation and conduct. Charles, ever since Melissa gave birth, had long intended to replace me, and was worried about not finding an excuse to punish me. Clara Hamilton's accusation at that time was exactly what he wanted. I was imprisoned in the vault, and then tortured by the three of them in turn until I died. Yet Clara Hamilton was still introduced into the socialite circle as a lady, receiving endless favor. In these days of being reborn, I have calculated everything meticulously. The torment I suffered that day, I will repay to them, one by one. It's just that I am alone and powerless, without any backing. No matter how much I risked, I couldn't kill all three of them at the same time. Moreover, even if the Hamilton estate is declining, it is still like a 100-legged worm, which remains stiff even after death. Only by slowly finding a way can I strike all at once at the crucial moment, leaving no one to escape. Therefore, when the little maid reported with a panicked expression that Clara Hamilton had rushed into the treasury to take bank drafts, I was not flustered at all. I even wrapped up some extra jewelry and carefully instructed Clara Hamilton that I would help her cover it up. Watching Clara Hamilton profusely thank me, the cold smile in my heart deepened. Only by causing such a colossal disaster can the Hamilton estate be doomed for all eternity. I guessed correctly. In less than 2 months, Clara Hamilton ran back weeping. Liam Miller had originally intended that after eloping, the Hamilton estate would have to begrudgingly accept the marriage. He would rely on his father-in-law's recommendation to advance his career. Seeing Melissa's belly gradually grow, Charles Hamilton had no mind left to manage this disgraceful daughter. Liam Miller, losing hope, vented his anger on her. He would hit and scold her at the slightest provocation, constantly mistreating her. Before long, all the money she had taken was completely spent by Liam Miller. She was 1 month pregnant. Now she came back to the villa crying, but her father never came to visit. Even the brother who loved her the most was so bewitched by that seductress that he didn't spare a single word of concern. Only I, the one who had raised her since childhood, cared for her the most. Naturally, she developed absolute trust in my words. She told me all her secrets. Liam said he would never betray me. He was originally very good to me. At first, he even heated the dishwashing water before giving it to me. If father had been willing to recommend him a little, I wouldn't be in this state. It's all father's fault. Being completely bewitched by that seductress. While pretending to comfort her, I gently and subtly advised her, the child is innocent. You still have to find a status for it, and then acknowledge each other later. When Liam sees the baby, the whole family can reunite. Clara Hamilton clearly took my words to heart. After she recovered from her injuries, she received the imperial decree for socialite selection and entered the circle awaiting selection. Before leaving, she specially handed over the love letters that she and Liam Miller had exchanged over the years to me, asking me to keep them safe. I held her hand and smiled with a look of simplicity. Very good. The net that had been cast for so long could finally be drawn in. Taking advantage of Clara Hamilton's entry into the circle, I had some free time and made a few trips to the Willow Villa. Melissa was about to give birth, her body heavy. I made a point of feigning concern in front of Charles several times, appearing extremely worried and thoughtful. I even took Melissa along to the banquets of the aristocrats in the metropolis, dedicating myself to taking care of her. The reputation of Lady Eleanor Stone, virtuous and benevolent, spread throughout the metropolis. This was accompanied by the impression of my honest simplicity. That the official lady could be so suppressed by a side wife suggested that I was easily bullied. The ladies in the metropolis also felt particularly sympathetic towards me, often inviting me to their manors for conversation. I took the opportunity to be particularly warm and enthusiastic with them. After every agreeable conversation, I would often give them clothes, jewelry, and similar items. Thanks to this, I gained some connections within the aristocracy of the metropolis. Melissa, having gained some face in front of outsiders, naturally became complacent. At this point, how could she forget the unfilial eldest daughter-in-law in the house? Victoria was dragged out by her every day, mocked and scolded in front of others. Afterward, she even spat a wad of phlegm on her face. Victoria hated her to the core. Her tearful accusations in front of Ethan Hamilton gradually became useless. Ethan Hamilton, a young master accustomed to a life of luxury, could only stomp his feet in anger. At most, he would dare to draw his sword and say he wanted to kill that seductress. But in the end, he only dared to make a small fuss in the courtyard, held Victoria to comfort her for a while, and that was it. Finally, one night, I went out for a digestive walk. I saw Victoria, wearing a thin white dress that barely covered her body, heading straight for Charles's study. The maid I had planted in the study came back to report that she knelt before Charles, looking weak and pathetic, which made Charles hurriedly walk around the desk to help her up. Before she could stand steady, she directly fell into Charles's arms. I smiled, applying more fragrant powder to my hand. It was already a dry wood and raging fire situation, so there was no need for the sexually stimulating incense I had placed in Charles's room anymore. In the end, it could no longer be hidden. Combined with my subtle hints, Melissa finally noticed the abnormality. Heavily pregnant, she rushed into the study and happened to witness the lewd act of the two of them. Even a person accustomed to seeing such things in the Platinum Club found it difficult to stomach this filthy sight. She desperately lunged forward, but was unexpectedly pushed hard from the shadows by Victoria, who was already prepared. This fall caused Melissa to bleed. A full-term fetus could endanger the mother's life. Victoria had originally intended this, wanting to kill two birds with one stone. Who knew that Melissa was so lucky? After losing half a basin of blood, she finally survived. Surviving death, she became even more aggressive. Just 1 month after giving birth, she sat in front of the gate of the Hamilton estate every day, wailing and accusing the estate of being contaminated and adultery. She was already articulate, and now she recounted the events in a vivid and captivating manner. The crowd watching the commotion surrounded the place 3 layers deep, but it was nothing compared to the even more dramatic uproar inside the manor. Ethan slapped Victoria for the first time in his life, but was kicked to the ground by Charles Hamilton and repeatedly beaten. He furiously drew his sword and plunged it straight into his father. Charles, though old, was still quick. He grabbed it, twisted it back, and stabbed Ethan Hamilton. Ethan Hamilton was just a weak scholar, who usually poured all his energy into Victoria. Unable to dodge, he was stabbed in the thigh, and fresh blood immediately gushed out. This stab wound not only injured Ethan Hamilton's leg tendons but also damaged his foundation. Victoria became even more unrestrained, moving straight into Charles's room to become the future lady. What joy was there in being the current lady? Compared to that, even the big boss, who was nearly 70 in the previous life, could tolerate her, let alone Charles, who was currently in the prime of his life. After a few critical blows, Ethan Hamilton was bedridden. In less than half a month, he died. He could have lived a little longer, but I had the little maid deliberately speak to him every day about Victoria and Charles's bedroom affairs, causing his wound to tear open repeatedly, never healing, and eventually festering and developing maggots. The room constantly reeked of a foul, unbearable odor. On his last day, he strained his neck and screamed all night, making it impossible for those in the basement to sleep soundly. I lifted my veil and covered my nose. Standing before his bed, a large ulcer had festered on Ethan Hamilton's thigh. Maggots were wriggling amidst the faint white bone. Even with all the incense burners in the room, the stench was hard to mask. He saw me, suddenly regaining his spirit, and even grabbed the bed to try and sit up. In the void, he stretched out his hand, clutching my robe hem tightly. Mother, I have been harmed to this extent by that seductress. You raised me since I was small. You must seek justice for me. I smiled, breaking his grip finger by finger. Then, in front of him, I took out a bottle of concentrated vinegar and slowly dropped it into the hole on his thigh. He was about to scream from the pain, but was silenced by the torn cloth I had prepared and stuffed into his mouth. The pain, like a drill piercing the heart, was not enough, letting him taste the pain like corroding bone was good too. He was already exhausted. A burst of pain and anger directly ended his life. When Charles arrived, I was sitting at the table, weeping bitterly. Only you are still willing to shed a few tears for this bastard child. I cried until my nose was red, lifting my sleeve to cover my face while wiping away tears. No matter what I raised him since he was small, how can I not be heartbroken? A mother's love for a lifetime. This is all I can do for him. My wide, loose sleeves almost completely hid the cold smile concealed beneath. Charles looked even more impatient. He kicked the coffin placed in the courtyard. Hurry and carry it out. Don't defile my manor gate. I softly nodded, still sobbing, but a surge of cold laughter churned within me. Such cold-hearted indifference, it turned out, wasn't reserved just for me. On one side, Ethan Hamilton died of illness, on the other, the seductress, Melissa, fared no better. She added fuel to the fire by wailing every day, which finally reached the president's ears. The president reprimanded Charles in front of all the officials for his improper family conduct. Furthermore, he ordered him to reform within 3 days. If he offended again, he would be demoted or stripped of his title. Charles usually favored Melissa, but women were ultimately just his playthings. If it truly jeopardized his position, he could even kill his own mother. The senator title had been passed down for generations. By his generation, due to baseless political accusations, it no longer commanded any prestige and was already like an egg hanging on a stick. Sending Clara Hamilton for socialite selection early on was the only intention he could think of to consolidate his title. Moreover, he now had Victoria. Charles had long abandoned his vows of eternal love with his former mistress. Melissa was caught by him, tied up tightly, and thrown to the ground. Charles was about to order someone to gag her. Victoria weakly suggested, "Why don't we cut out her tongue and be done with it?" Truly a face of an angel, heart of a devil. I sat by the side, secretly praising her viciousness in my heart. Melissa, no matter how much she hated the couple, could only sob with her mouth full of fresh blood. Victoria, with just a few words, caused Charles to leave. I also quickly claimed to be ill with shortness of breath to leave early. She would surely demand repayment for that day's humiliation 100-fold. If I were present, I might not have been comfortable. Naturally, sitting in my warm room did not prevent me from knowing what happened in the main hall. The maid returned to report that Victoria had ordered boiling water and an iron brush. Scalding water was poured over Melissa in layers. Melissa's originally soft and fair skin immediately separated from the flesh when burned. Victoria then used a barbed iron brush to scrape off that layer of skin and flesh. Melissa was frail and quickly saw bone. She fainted from the pain after just a few strokes. But Victoria was very patient, ordering people to pry open her mouth and pour ginseng broth down her throat to keep her breathing. She ordered people to scrape off layer after layer of skin, while she herself sat on a chair, calmly sipping tea. Only when Melissa's body was covered in wounds without a single piece of intact skin did she order people to wrap her in a straw mat and throw her out onto the execution ground. It was said that the whole room was filled with a bizarre smell of burnt flesh. None of the maids or servants present didn't vomit. That tea house star in the metropolis ended up so tragically. It was truly lamentable. I tried to suppress the vague sense of unease in my heart. This Victoria was truly a ruthless character. The turmoil within the manor continued, and news also came from the political circle. Clara Hamilton was successfully selected as a socialite. I don't know what method she used, but she legitimately became Lady Clara, the president's new favored lady. Coincidentally, the news came just as she was confirmed to be pregnant. When the informant reported this, Charles, whose face had been gloomy recently, smiled for the first time. He hadn't expected this daughter, who had become superfluous, to be useful one day. He urged me to quickly prepare to visit her at the White House. The Victoria beside him looked at me with an incredibly deep, meaningful gaze. She had long known that one manor could not hold two ladies. She was probably already plotting murder. Going to the White House was considered a temporary escape from the danger. However, some things still had to be planned early. I specifically packed many items and secretly brought all the bank drafts and ledgers that I had hidden for many years. When I saw her again, Clara Hamilton wept miserably, only when she pulled me inside did she recount the entire situation. It turned out that on her first day at the White House, she met Dr. Marcus, the doctor who had been infatuated with her for a long time. He had met Clara Hamilton once as a child and had been lovesick ever since, writing many poems to express his feelings. Unfortunately, he had an ugly face. That year, Clara Hamilton hadn't even given him a smile. Now, because of the child in her belly, she did not hesitate to feign intimacy with this man with small eyes, a big mouth, and a height of less than 6 feet. Thanks to this, she obtained a dose of strange medicine that could regenerate decaying flesh, helping her pass the physical examination. Although the initial effect was fast, the newly regenerated flesh was unbearably itchy and still required daily, sexual intercourse with Dr. Marcus for support. Dr. Marcus, having tasted the sweetness, used this to threaten her, maintaining a close, intimate relationship with her in the White House. He even concealed the fact that she was pregnant out of wedlock. It was only reported when the president paid a visit. Under the dual torment of mind and body, Clara Hamilton was emaciated and haggard, but acquired a sickly kind of beauty. She lay on my lap, crying a river. I pretended to stroke her head and comforted her. Inwardly, I felt extremely uncomfortable. Did your lover, Liam Miller, come to the house to ask about you? Her face, covered in tears, still held on to hope. Asking about that writer named Miller. An idea suddenly struck me, and I changed my expression. Of course he did. I saw him at the gate that day. The autumn wind was chilly, but he was only wearing a single robe. He said he had only been momentarily confused when he treated you that way. He originally wanted to take you back, but didn't expect you to enter the socialite circle. So he had to be distant like clouds and smoke. He cried and left, enduring the frost and wind. He looked truly heartbroken. I deliberately spoke with a sorrowful and tragic tone, making Clara Hamilton heartbroken and filled with longing. As expected, she was moved by pity immediately, grabbing my hand and begging me to save him. I almost burst out laughing. Her mind is truly gone. She was in danger herself, yet still dreaming of her lover. It's just that I can barely save myself now. I'm afraid I can't do anything. I pretended to hesitate, and in a few sentences, I described how Victoria was, self-importantly, wielding power in the manor. Clara Hamilton's eyes widened. Her biological brother's death didn't matter, but Victoria, whom she always looked down upon, was about to become her official lady. How could she swallow this insult? I naturally wouldn't miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. After all, only by preparing for my own funeral could I confidently go further. On my way out of the White House, I watched Senator Hamilton's carriage leave from a distance, finally letting out a sigh of relief. I had finally escaped this man-eating household. A few days later, grim news spread throughout the metropolis. The dignified and gentle Lady Eleanor Stone of the manor was unexpectedly killed when her carriage and sedan chair fell down a cliff on the way back to the villa, and her body was never recovered. Lady Eleanor Stone was originally gentle and had an honest, enthusiastic nature. she had some goodwill within the inner quarters of the political families. Now, having met with this unexpected calamity, the aristocrats coming to mourn in the metropolis were endless, but all of them shook their heads and left after meeting the new lady, Victoria. This Victoria was originally the official wife listed in the genealogy of Ethan Hamilton, Senator Hamilton's son, yet somehow, she legitimately became the current lady. It turned out that the words the madwoman cried and wailed daily in front of the gate of the Hamilton estate last month were all true. Victoria's methods were too ruthless, and Lady Eleanor Stone probably did not escape being secretly harmed by her. The Hamilton estate's reputation was ruined, and their doors were deserted. Now, they completely relied on Lady Clara, who was pregnant in the socialite circle, just to maintain a shred of dignity. Eleanor Stone was originally a registered lady, although the family was in decline. She was still from a political family that spanned generations. Now that this matter had spread throughout the metropolis concerning her family's reputation, the Stone family had no choice but to strike the great drum of the Supreme Court to seek justice. Before the news could spread far, a little maid ran out and said that the carriage driver that day was instructed by Victoria. He trembled as he recounted how Victoria had abused and killed Charles's redeemed mistress. The evidence was presented piece by piece, terrifying all those present. She was just a weak woman, yet her methods could be this cruel. One incident after another forced Senator Charles Hamilton to hastily cut off his relationship with her. He even took advantage of others' difficulties, revealing everything about Victoria being the daughter of a criminal who had fled back to the metropolis. The power struggle was so intense that even the current president was astonished. Lady Clara also cried and pleaded beside him, whispering many words. Victoria was escorted to the vault. She would be executed the following spring. Even Charles was implicated, confined to the ancestral manor. When the news arrived, I was sitting in the church below the mountain, holding a cup of hot tea, watching a rare heavy snow fall gently upon the world. Clara Hamilton had agreed to help me fake my death and escape. In return, I had to help her and Liam Miller exchange letters outside the White House. Whether or not Liam Miller was found was not very important. After all, with the letters in hand, I had long since mimicked his handwriting. Clara Hamilton was truly a devoted lover. In just 1 month, she wrote dozens of letters, all intensely passionate. They made even me, at this age, blush. She wrote about how much she missed Liam Miller. To prove her purity, she also wrote many things about having to endure the elderly president and wished him a blink of an eye, a wrinkle of the brow. I patiently imitated Liam Miller's tone, comforting her with gentle words, and pretending to be jealous, which made her even more unrestrained in her letters. Additionally, Clara Hamilton wrote extensively about how Charles at home disrespected the president. She said that his current endurance of humiliation was to protect the family's glory, but he had to sacrifice himself. After several exchanges of letters, she eventually began to entertain the idea of escaping the White House. Liam Miller remained gentle as before, comforting her that she should prioritize prenatal care and protect their child. He also casually mentioned that the White House often had water carts coming and going to store Jade Spring mountain water. If she could hide inside, she might be able to smoothly escape the White House. After completing my calculations, 1 month before she was due to give birth, I suddenly cut off contact. Clara Hamilton had always thought that I could only survive on what she gave me, so she naturally believed she held all my weaknesses. Little did she know that even while still at the estate, I had altered the manor's ledgers and selected and purchased houses and shops, awaiting the day of the cicada shedding its shell. The time spent living in the church was merely to give me an excuse and to gather more evidence in my hands. On the day I opened my shop, the security in the metropolis suddenly became stricter. Teams of soldiers surrounded the city inside and out. There were guards posted in front of every house. It was said that Lady Clara in the socialite circle, Charles's daughter, almost escaped the White House by hiding in a water cart in order to meet her lover. If it weren't for the bumpy road, and Lady Clara couldn't bear the pain and screamed, she would probably have already left the city by now. It was said that she was also pregnant. After struggling all day, she gave birth to a full-term stillborn baby, but held it tightly, refusing to let go. No one knew whether it was the dragon seed or karmic retribution. This scandalous bedroom matter spread everywhere. The president was furious. The Hamilton estate was also placed under house arrest. An imperial decree was issued demanding a thorough investigation. A bundle of letters exchanged over several months, plus evidence of Charles taking bribes and committing treason, was suddenly hung in front of the gate of the Supreme Court one night. As expected, the number of people to be executed in the spring increased by several. The people of the Supreme Court worked swiftly. After a comprehensive roundup, they finally found the Liam Miller I had been seeking all this time. The list even included that ugly doctor, Dr. Marcus. That's good. They're family. After all, they must be reunited and complete. I smiled and rewarded the maid who brought the news, and instructed her to select a few exquisite earring jewels to wear and share with her younger sisters. As the owner of a jewelry store, gifts naturally had to be unique. The following days were busier for me, combining both lives at the estate. I had never been so busy. I once worried that, having been accustomed to being an official's daughter, the lady of the estate, who only knew how to rely on others, how could I show my face to run a business? A person who only knew how to live according to the rules. If not pushed to a dead end, how could I think of escaping? Even though I had decided since my rebirth, I still waited until Victoria acted against me before deciding to fight to the death, without retreat. But when I truly took that step, I felt incredibly relieved. Heaven is high and the earth is wide. Where is there no place for me to live? The newly opened jewelry shop in the metropolis became the new favorite of the aristocracy after just 2 months. The proprietress never showed her face behind the scenes, yet she knew the preferences of every noble young lady. The daughters of officials, seeing their maids constantly wearing unique hairpins, naturally developed a desire for beauty. Just at this time, the popular colors and styles favored by the ladies of the metropolis were sent to each manor. It was said that the proprietress had just crafted them and invited the young ladies and ladies to appreciate them. In an instant, customers flocked in, and the store was bustling like a marketplace. I had to open 2 more branches to temporarily satisfy the women's enthusiasm. Before the execution day, I specially made time, covering my face and bringing offerings. I bribed the jailer, lying that I was a servant of the estate, wanting to see my masters one last time. As soon as I stepped into the vault, I was engulfed by the cold. The days and nights I was imprisoned here years ago inevitably flashed through my mind one by one. I never thought that Senator Charles Hamilton, once so imposing, could be so greedy for just a piece of cake. I slowly removed my mask. Charles, who was eating half a piece of cake, suddenly had his eyes wide open and stammered. He lunged at the bars, saying, "Sorry," he begged me to save him for the sake of our marriage. He even pulled Victoria, who had been beaten beyond recognition, next to him, and in front of me, slapped her a few loud, crisp times. Amidst his frantic pleas, I covered my face again, then smiled and offered him more food. Charles, eat plenty, eat your fill before you go. 2 lives as husband and wife. This is all I can do for you. Clara Hamilton was imprisoned in a different cell, covered in wounds. She looked frantic all day, clutching a ragged pillow. Her entire body reeked of a foul odor, yet her face was layered with bizarre smiles. The scoundrel Liam Miller next to her cursed her non-stop. He would hit and punch her at the slightest provocation, his mouth constantly yelling words like, "Jinx," full of contempt and disgust. Only the doctor, Dr. Marcus, confined in the next room, still tried to press his nose close to Clara Hamilton to smell her. That ugly face was layered with besotted smiles. I felt uncomfortable and just wanted to leave quickly, but this prison was quite deep. I stumbled halfway before I could see the sunlight again. stepping out of the cold and dark the vault. The sudden warmth that rushed towards me made me shiver. It seemed at the bone-chilling cold I experienced when I died in the vault that year finally completely vanished from my body. That's good. I, Eleanor Stone, have finally come back to life. The warm youth, the nightingale arrives. It's spring again, but I can't be lazy anymore. I still have to go to the shop to busy myself with business. I carried a smile and stepped into that patch of spring light. End.